Dad's all torn up and Mom's got like a harpoon thing in her neck and they're getting bigger.
They'll eat anything.
You know, those, man-eating hairballs that you do not believe in.
Critters. They bite.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of They Bite, the only Critters podcast in the world. I am Sean Beard, of course, always with my man Chris.
Critters rolling, what? John Naulin, what?
What the fuck? All right, yeah. So that just happened. Best way to start the show. Oh God, that was Limp Bizkit, wasn't it?
I apologize for the awful singing. Nothing else came to my head when I was trying to think of the intro here.
And that was pretty great, actually. I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you. I like it. Now I know y'all be loving this shit right here.
But welcome to They Bite podcast. Like Sean was saying, we have a special guest with us today. As you can tell from my awesome music, we have John Naulin.
Yes, awesome. Worked on the first movie. Was he the key special effects artist? Is that how you put it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
he pretty much worked in the entire film except for maybe like one scene or so that he wasn't really a part of, but pretty much there from start to finish.
Hell yeah. And then before we get to that, we got some news. Nothing too major, but go ahead, Chris, about the back cover, right?
Yeah, the back cover scan of the Critters Attack Blu-ray was released, and it shows, some cool images there. It's got the shot with the whole, like, the family. I guess it's a family, but it's like all the kids and stuff in the background, and then one shot of Dee Wallace holding a gun, and then a shot of like somebody described it as an elderly looking critter, like peeking out from the side of the box. It's kind of funny, but it's got the descriptions for all the bonus features and stuff listed on there, and just thought I'd share that with everybody. It was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, and you said that the director, got a hold of you, correct?
Yeah, Bobby Miller. He contacted me, and he had never seen the back cover scan either. He was excited about it, and I guess he follows the page of Critters Rehatched, and he reached out and said, thanks for sharing that with everybody. He's glad that we found it.
Hell yeah. And now what else? Oh, I'm losing my train of thought here. I just had one. Damn it. Oh crap.
Critters rolling.
Yeah. Now I know you'll be loving this shit right here. Oh, Chris, yeah. I just remembered what I was going to say.
What's that, Sean?
So a dude in the Critters group got a hold of me. I can't remember his name right now. Sorry, but shout out to you. And he read an interview with Dee Wallace. And now this is spoilers. So, fair warning for everyone. It's not a big spoiler, but we had the theory of, will Dee Wallace be the character that she was from the movies, or will she be just a bounty hunter taking on her image? And it is not. What was her character's name? Gosh darn it.
Her character name is Aunt Dee.
Yes, okay. Oh, really? Yeah, she's Helen Brown, dumbass.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what the description says. Is like it says Aunt Dee. So
really? Well, that's strange because in the interview she more or less confirmed that she's Helen. And
yeah, I think maybe they put that in there just to throw you off, so you didn't know she was playing the same character or not. Who knows? I don't know.
Well, in the interview, she said that she got contacted for it, and she would only agree to do it if the critters were not CGI, because she said that would really upset the fan base. They confirmed for her that they wouldn't be CGI, and she said that she would be reprising a role as Helen. Years later, apparently all of her family members have been killed by critters, and she even jokingly said, I don't know when that apparently happened, but and Here she is years later, and the critters are back, and she's taking on the role as a bounty hunter, but she is Helen. So there's the spoiler. I don't think it's too big of a spoiler, but we did have that theory,
Yeah.
and
So
that
it's
debunks it.
kind of the way that like Charlie did, where Charlie wasn't an official, like he wasn't an alien bounty hunter. It's not somebody took his face. It's actually Charlie, and he was a bounty hunter. The same way that this one, it's actually Helen Brown. She's going to be hunting down Kreitz now in the same vein as a bounty hunter.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. I was cool with either scenario, so I'm happy with that.
Yeah, it's something that we were hoping that was going to happen, and that pretty much confirms that theory. So.
Yeah, right on. So yeah, that's all we got for news. So all right, now we'll segue into the interview.
We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take a break, guys. And when we come back, we are going to have key special effects artist, special effect makeup artist from the first Critters movie, John Naulin, on with us.
That's right.
Of all the planets in the galaxy, they chose ours. They're hungry. And we are their favorite food. Critters. They bite. Rated PG-13.
Critters opens Friday at a theater near you.
All right, guys. Welcome back to Critters They Bite podcast. With us today, we have special guests. We have John Naulin. That's how you pronounce your name, right? Naulin?
It is.
All right. I got something right today. That's good.
We're on a roll.
If you don't know, John was a special makeup effects artist on the first Critters movie, and we've had a few people on. It's been special make. We had Chris Biggs and stuff on in the past, and now we're moved on. We got John on here, and he's going to tell us a little bit about his involvement working on the first Critters movie. So, John, welcome aboard.
Well, thank you, guys. How you doing? I got involved with Critters very early on, and they had seen, the work we'd done on Reanimator, and they were anxious to hire me on. When we were doing Reanimator, we'd also had some visits from the Kyoto brothers over at the shop, so we were able to recommend them to the Kyoto brothers as well. And by we, I mean myself and Tony Dublin.
Oh, right on. Okay. Oh, wow.
So, did you work on? Oh, sorry.
No, so Critters all goes back to Reanimator. That's
everything goes. It's like all the roads lead to Rome, you know.
Oh, that really just blew my mind. That's really interesting.
Yes.
Wow.
So whenever you worked on it, were you part of more of like the actual makeup part on like actors and stuff, or the set design makeup and stuff, or did you work on the actual puppets any?
Okay, well, I was key for special effects makeup. And so what I did is I designed everything but the critters.
Okay.
So
Wow.
all of the aliens and all of that sort of stuff. And and we designed them. We did the sculpture work, did the mold work, created the prosthetics, created all the various different FLs in conjunction with the physical special effects team, partially because Tony crossed over into that. He made the weaponry, the gun that Johnny wore. That was that was actually a pretty sophisticated gun. That was about a third of our budget. And
really, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it is a badass cannon. We love that. Yeah.
Well, there were 3 or 4 different versions of it. There was like stunt version of it that just kind of hung there, and it was made out of rubber so that if you fell on it, it didn't, it didn't take your leg out for the rest of your life.
Sure.
Then there was the version that you kicked it down and it pops up, and then the barrel extends, and that was done for the close-ups. And then there was an actual firing gun that would hold 4 12-gauge shotgun shells. And
really?
Yeah, the shotgun shells were specially made so that they were blanks, of course, but they were specially made so they would fire different colors and that they would shoot out a lot of color and flame and that sort of thing. So,
Oh, that is so cool. Wow.
and that was an electronically ignition system on the gun. So that's pretty sophisticated for the time.
Now, were there two of those ones that actually fired, since there were two bounty hunters with guns, or were there really just three guns that were actually used?
Well, there were three types that were used.
Oh, okay,
There was only one firing gun, and
okay.
usually they went into a close up for you to see that, so they
Yeah,
could
good
use
point.
the
Sure.
same gun from two different angles, and it's two guns.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Now, John, you showed some pictures with everybody on the Critters Rehatch Facebook group, behind the scenes photos of the space aliens at the beginning of the film. In the actual movie, you only see them just for a few seconds, but there was a lot more that went into it that was cut out, that wasn't used and everything, because you have some good shots of them. Can you explain a little bit about maybe what was actually supposed to happen during those scenes that was cut out and why they weren't used so much?
It was primarily cut for length, if I'm recalling correctly. By the time that they got the credits in place, they wanted to use the Sly Stallone method, and so that meant that it couldn't be longer than about 93 or 94 minutes. So they were trying to cut it for length.
And what was, do you know what was really even supposed to happen in those scenes?
Oh yeah, they were.
Okay.
Yeah, there was. They were hunting down the Krites at the beginning, and first of all, the Krites escape.
Yes.
And they take off, and then they're hunting them down. And then they engage the they engage the bounty hunters.
Okay, so those monsters that you created were basically like like prison guards.
Well, the ones that are kind of almost like giant marsupial looking,
Yeah.
elephantine type of
Yeah, I always thought
covering on them.
anteater.
Yeah. They were the guards.
Okay.
And then you've got Xanti was the warden, and Xanti was on a counterbalanced floating rig that Tony and I also made. So that was mounted on a dolly, and so that could actually track down through the through the sets. It was pretty cool.
Oh, right.
And with him floating on it, basically off camera arm supporting it. And so there were also then when they call the bounty hunters, you see the bounty hunters with what we called, for lack of a better term, the Q-tip version of the bounty hunters, which was a translucent silicone mask, and it was very hard to see through those. So we actually added tiny little. I used leather punches to create a couple tiny holes in front of the eyes. And one of the shots, when you first see those guys and they're walking along, if you look really carefully, one of those guys walks right into the bulkhead. It's kind of like the stormtrooper on the original Star Wars.
Get out of here.
No,
you ever noticed this, Chris?
I don't think I've ever noticed that, but I'm definitely going to have to go back and check.
Yeah, we're gonna be checking our copies tonight.
Now I'm gonna tell on him, because that's an old friend of mine that went down and played that part, and his name is Conrad Williams, and he now lives in Texas with he just had a heart transplant 3 years ago.
Oh.
So
now, does he bump his head in the scene? What are we looking for?
He's supposed to be walking, through, and it's got like a doorway opening, kind of a pilaster type opening.
Yeah.
And because he has no peripheral vision whatsoever, he just kind of punk and just kind of runs into it. Runs into it, tilts his head, and keeps going. And so now I've given everybody something to look at.
I bet I've noticed it. Like, I bet when I watch it back, I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, I've noticed that, but I've never really thought about it or something.
Yeah.
We've seen the movie hundreds of times between us.
Right.
Oh, that's so cool. Was there? And I'm assuming not, but they do mention that a few of the guards were already like taken out by the Krites. Was there any scenes of the creatures you created actually being eaten by the Krites?
There were scenes of the which I think part of which is left in the movie, the explosion of the Krites getting loose.
Yes,
And
you do
see, just kind of in the shadow in a corner, you can see one of the guards kind of flying backwards.
Yes, definitely.
But they never did, they never did insert shots on them.
Okay.
So
right
we
on.
never got to see what color their blood was or anything.
Right on. Oh, that is really awesome. We're probably going to be referencing the photos you posted in the group throughout this.
Okay.
Because they are amazing. Like Chris and I, we've seen every picture at this point. So when we see something new, it's just jaw dropping. Did you work on the chest from? Oh gosh,
Billy Zane's death scene.
Yes.
Oh yeah. I mean, pretty much if it's not a critter, we made it. I mean, we made Xanti. Now I had the film went long, and I was contractually obligated to start on From Beyond. So we got that's when that's basically when Chris Biggs and Bill Forsh came in to just do a couple of days of inserts with Xanti.
Okay.
Mostly the close up where he calls for them to get the to go ahead and order up the bounty hunters.
So what's the story about the chess piece? Because I know that you showed those behind the scenes pictures, and in the Blu-ray documentaries, they talk about that scene being cut down because it was too violent, and there was a lot of stuff. But they pretty much all the footage doesn't really exist anymore. So can you tell us a little bit about the making of that scene? And
okay, well, first of all, it's done in three cutaways, 3 takes. And the first one was done on Billy Zane's double. Okay. And I did show a picture of him. I don't know his name, but I showed a picture of him.
That picture, sorry, that picture was actually the first time that I knew that he even had a double in that scene. I always just assumed that the only person that ever doubled him was the person who ran into the wall. And I didn't know he had someone doubling him for the part that he got his chest eaten out on.
Yeah, it's kind of just the starts digging at his chest type of prosthetic there. So
so it's like the first bite that he takes out was the
first well, and it scratches as well, because they got they use their claws as well, and then we did one where we had we were in the actual barn, and we'd gone in and we'd done a cutaway of a couple of boards. And we'd put a little drop down piece. So Billy Zane's body actually dropped down and then back up. So it kind of, went backwards went down through the floor a little bit. And it was still supported. And then what we had the thicker piece, which I also showed, kind of showed it being held up, I think, by John Griswold. And the thicker piece had an opening down in the corner, and so it had all the entrails and the guts and all that sort of stuff in there. And that was just for a shot of the critter, literally like it's inside his body, just like just chomping around on his chest. And they show moments of that, but from a pretty low angle. And then one of the most bizarre things in the whole film that from having been there, one of my most memorable things was when we're dealing with I'm terrible with Nadine's double.
Oh yeah, okay. Nadine Vandervelde.
Yeah, Nadine Vandervelde, and she played April, but she had a double as well. And again, we just needed somebody to kind of wave this stick through the scene, And I'm sure you guys understand perspective. You don't have to, like a lot of the actors, it looks like they're actually hitting the person, but they're several inches in front of it, and the actor that gets hit just reacts properly, and it works. All right. Well, this is the same sort of thing. They went over and over. I was there. I was up there in the loft with them as they went over. I explained to her the whole bit. You do not hit the critter. You wave this in front of the critter. All right. It can be as much as 6 to 8 inches in front of the critter. Don't worry about it. It'll look fine. And then, of course, now we got Charlie down below. This Charlie Kyoto. It is the hero. It is the hero close-up critter.
Yeah.
It's got all kinds of servos and stuff in it. It kind of perks up, looks at her, and she goes to swing the stick. And when they yelled action, she just went bam and came right down on that thing. I mean, she hit it like if it had been a baseball, it would have been at least a double. She took that it's supposed to be the end of a farm implement. She took that thing and just beat the crud out of it. And you could hear the fiberglass shell in it just break.
Unbelievable.
And you could hear this, and I mean, that's Charlie down below as she his hand's inside there. And so he pulled his hand straight down. And when he pulled his hand straight down, the critter kind of stood up for just a flash of a second. And it was really funny. It was really funny in dailies, too. It's like it stood up like, hey, and then went dunk and just fell over dead. It was actually a very, very funny take. But then I heard a very unhappy Charlie heading up those kind of a half ladder, half stairs type of thing. And he's coming. I mean, he's coming, man. And at this point, we have to get between him and her.
Oh man.
Yeah, and
lucky I wasn't there.
Their mechanical guy had to stay up all weekend rebuilding that thing. I mean,
oh, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Now, when you guys shot this whole scene, did you guys go really in order, or was this one of like the first scenes with the critters you shot? Like how far into were you with this hero critter?
This is not one of the first scenes. I was setting up some stuff up in the bedroom as well. Some of the quills shooting into Dee Wallace and Billy Greenbush and those sorts of inserts. So I was kind of back and forth between the setup on the two of them, and I'm trying to remember where that was in the schedule. I'll have to tell you that film was the film was a difficult film from a crew standpoint. You guys ever worked on a film?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, you've got the script, and then when they do rewrites, they put the rewrites in a different color page. Okay.
Okay.
So you'll have a green page, or you'll have a blue page, or you'll have a pink page. All right. By the time they were done, they had gone through all the different colors and were back to white. The script looked like a rainbow. There were so many reworks, rewrites, little gags, stuff like that we were just so constantly tap dancing to catch up with the changes that had been made that it was, it kind of blurs together, quite frankly. Because when I wasn't on set, I was trying to run lab work out of 2 trailers that we had, in the base camp. I had people doing work for me, in other areas, like for lab work. I had John Goodwin running parts and Jerry Quist running parts. I had Steve Patino doing some molds. I had stuff. So I mean, when I wasn't on set, I was also in the processes of organizing all of this. And then to confuse the issue even more, I was finishing up a fairly large 4-year project for the government that had to be done by a specific time. So it was a crazy prep.
Wow, you had your hands loaded and still came out on top with everything, because that was an amazing film. So,
Well, intriguingly enough, I can't say enough about Stephen Herrick, the director.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest with you, I hats off to this man, because I have no idea how he managed this. But with all of these changes and all of this stuff, the ironic thing was that the movie that was cut together was pretty much the original script. I have no idea why, because I don't think we ever shot the original script. But it came out, it came out being told almost exactly in the original format.
Well, I think, Chris, do we have copies of the original scripts?
yeah, I got copies of the original ones. I think they came from the Kyoto brothers.
And
so
you're right.
They're pretty close to the accuracy of the original, I believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but if you saw the shooting process and all the different, well, I'll give you an example. They wrote another 2-page chase sequence over a scorched planet of these alien creatures chasing the Krites, and I had to make 2 more alien characters, and they of course did not want the same aliens; they were different aliens. And they brought this little Russian gymnast out, and I had to do head cast on her in the trailer. Doing head casts and sculpture and stuff like that in between trying to go in and do stuff on set was just unreal. Sleep was not an option. I stayed out there many nights, out on the location, and just had to keep working through.
Do you have pictures of those?
Actually, I did include those. I sent those into the. I said the remarkable thing is that this was never seen, and it's kind of almost an ape-like alien. And then I had a picture of my son with the mask.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And they never, they never even. I got them done, and I was like, okay, here are the scenes for the chase sequence, and they, honest to God, went, what chase sequence? What are you talking about?
So, who was the one that was making all these decisions for these changes? Was it the producers, or was it like the executives from the studio?
There really was no studio. You gotta understand, this was brand new. I mean, when we started this project, my first 2 checks came from a company in New York that was a porno company.
Full circle.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that was before, it was a company called Smart Egg. And, I mean, I don't think hardcore or whatever, but, basically, exploitation stuff. And, and then, I told you I got into it very, very early in the early design phases of it. And it became the studio this was kind of day one there at the studio.
Now, there were a lot of scenes, it sounds, that were shot and not used. Can you name a few that stick out? Are there any scenes
there was a lot more. There was a lot more in the pre-title sequence that was just kind of alluded to. And I mean, that's one of the things that you kind of take for granted, is that when you're doing insert special effects stuff, this is not called, special effectorama. It's called Critters. And it wasn't about the guards, and it wasn't about Zanti, and it wasn't about any of that.
Mm-hmm.
The only ones we featured, were the 2 bodyguards and the shapeshifters and the Krites, because that's really what the movie was about. And like I said, the Kyotos did the majority of that. One of the things that Tony got involved with is the scene where the shadow of the critter grows larger and larger and larger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And that's an old gag, and it's done with it's called a Dickie the Stick gag. It's basically done with a shadow cutout of a critter, and then you pull it closer and closer to a long focal length lens, and it gets bigger and bigger. I mean, it just changes. You just change it in relationship to the light, and the shadow gets bigger.
Yeah.
and they filmed the shadow. So I mean, it worked. It worked beautifully. You know, we used some old style effects and you know made it with the electronic elements of the gun and some of the other stuff that they did.
So I have to ask this question. In the bowling alley scene, was there ever anything decided to have like a critter coming up through the bowling rig?
You mean you talk about up out of the where the balls come out of?
Yeah, the ball return.
I believe, and again, that would have been pretty much a. You'd really better ask one of the Kyotos of that, but I believe that there was a shroud that was separated, and there was an insert shot of that. Yes, and by the shroud, I mean the part of the housing where the ball comes out.
Yeah, Sean, I knew it. I've always knew that there was going to be a shot like that, but nobody could ever confirm that. So,
well, how did you figure? Just like wanting it?
Well, I will have to tell you that was one of the days when I did not have a remarkable amount to do on set, and so I had a couple other artists working for me, and I kind of used that day to get caught up on some of the stuff that we were building as we were going.
Were you there for the church explosion scenes?
Oh yeah, I was there for the whole church thing. We did a lot of interacting with special effects. They brought Joe Lombardi in out of retirement to blow the house.
Oh really?
And that was awesome. Crazy.
Every person we talked to says that house explosion was very legit.
Oh yeah, that house explosion. He had a couple of kind of flash, very very strong million candle power flash gags that he had left over from one of the 007 movies, one of the James Bond movies. Okay. And he put those in there, and then they went in. And that house it didn't have a back on it, but for the most part, it was pretty practical. And so they built the majority of a house, including functional rooms in the second story and all of that. And they went in there and they wrapped over 5,000 feet of primer cord. So basically a mile's worth of primer cord on there. And then these two giant torch gags. And the funny thing was that the light and everything and the pieces went up, and so it drew I was in the very first little bunker out in front of it, and we shot it. They had to shoot it. They said, okay, we've got to shoot it. We can't run it through the day. Everything's hot, everything's ready, and we're running out of night. We shot it about 45 minutes before daylight.
Oh, wow. I don't think we've ever known that. Okay, wow.
Yeah. So that was shot just before sunrise. And it was, I know that my eyes went up and followed that thing up. It almost looked like that house just launched because pieces of it did. And they were raining down all around us.
Oh, yeah.
But then when you got back down to it, actually there was a lot of the house that was still standing, but it was great. It was one of, and I've done 118 feature films, and it was one of the best explosions I've been around.
That rules. And now, how far are you guys from like an actual civilization from the filming spot? Like, could like the town over definitely hear that explosion?
We're a mile. At this point, we're a little over a mile south of Magic Mountain, which is an amusement park.
Okay,
and
people heard that.
That whole hillside is houses now. But back in the day, there was they were going to develop it. I think it was called Stevenson's Ranch, and they were going to develop it. So they'd already put a road through, and they'd already put some stuff like that. So we were able to shoot the highway sequences with the police car out on that section of road. They went in and they built the barn, and the whole house and the little lean-to off of the house was all done practical.
Oh wow! Well, I think in October we're actually going to be scouting out the locations of the film. So I might get a hold of you for where that cop location was if you have any memory. Because
Well, I mean, I just don't know how much of it is still there.
Sure. We'll find a rock. We'll be like, this is definitely it, man.
I have a very strange memory, and the fact that I have an almost eidetic memory. So I would, if it was still the same way that it was then, I could drive you right to it.
Right.
Because I don't forget things like that. But the bottom line is, I mean, there are thousands of people living in that area today. And a lot of those houses are worth $750,000 to $1 million and a quarter. It's a very nice area. But I got to tell you about the cow.
Oh, please.
Because the cow was another one of the crazy things on the film. Now we're talking about the whole night was bizarre, but we're talking about the night where the critters go out and they get their first, their what do they call it? First
taste of Earth.
Yeah, but right. But they literally, there's a line there. Anyhow, first bite or first kill or something like that. And they go out and they're munching on this cow. And they're organ deep in this cow and they're working on it. Now, let's really stop to think about it. I don't have an actor. All right. It's obviously not going to be a real cow. So that is not a makeup effects gag. That is a prop. So I never included it in my breakdown.
Oh.
And because I guess the prop guys couldn't go out and rent one, they never included it in their breakdown. So then they come to me and they go, "Where's the cow?" And I go, "What cow? What are you talking about?" The cow where they go, where they go in and the critters start feeding. And I'm like, "Talk to props." And they said, "No, they sent us to you." I said, "There's no cow." And they said, "There's got to be a cow." And I mean, I said, "Well, there's no budget for a cow." I mean, guys, you got me. I mean, what they had us building for the money was just not even similar to what it should have been. So it was like, okay. And they said, "Well, we got to have a cow." And one of my guys, and I don't remember, might have been Greg Johnson, said, "I got a cow skull with horns on it." And we used to have it sitting out in front of our house, but nobody likes it. So I'll bring that in. So I had a head. And we were right next to a hardware store. So I went over and I bought a bunch of PVC pipe and I bought chicken wire. And my wife, Shayna, went out and bought black fun fur, right? The stuff that was about an inch thick. And I sculpted that stupid thing out of PVC pipe, chicken wire.
It's like a float at a parade.
And I used it and I made all the insides and stuff out of several rolls of paper towels and latex. And I just soaked them in the latex and just kind of free form sculpted them into the shape of muscles and tissue and organs and all of that sort of thing. And then Greg did some work on it as well. And then I went in and painted it. And son of a gun, if it didn't look pretty darn good. I mean, it really did look pretty good. And
I've never questioned it.
Yeah. So then we took a bunch of my blood that I perfected on Reanimator, and some let's just say that we actually did make a swing by a real meat department, and so we had a few pounds of hamburger and some various different pieces, and we dipped in the blood and kind of went in there for them to grab and play with and all of that stuff. And then that whole night they were using liquid nitrogen to create a heavy fog, a ground fog through this whole thing.
We've never known that.
It's like I think they had 2 big tanks of liquid nitrogen up on the hill above us, and It was 90 degrees out. It was summertime, and it dropped. It dropped to the 40s.
Oh, cool.
I was wearing every piece of clothing I had in the trailer. I was like, oh my God, you could see your breath, all of this sort of thing. And that's when they shot, the outside of the spaceship. And they shot the feeding start. That was the line. Feeding start. Yeah. And that's when they shot the cow. And then they shot a couple other things that night. So we went on beyond the cow. And I had pointed out to them that, once I clean the extra meat and stuff up out of the cow, it is a prop. Deal with it what you may. I've got my hands full doing other stuff. So I'm off doing that. Well, nobody from set deco or props ever picks up the cow. All right. I am on, it is now weeks later. I am literally on pre-production for From Beyond, and I'm driving out getting some parts that I had made and machined. And so I've got the radio on, and there's talk radio, and this person calls in and swears up and down that they have found a cattle mutilation in the desert. And then they tell where they are. And I'm sitting here and I'm going, oh my God, that's the cow.
You got to be kidding me.
I am not kidding you. And I literally listened to them. And I'm like, I said to Shada, my wife, I said, I should tell somebody. And she goes, I wouldn't tell anybody that you left this thing out in the desert. I said,
yeah.
Well, I mean, I didn't leave it. They left it. And she goes, yeah, well, if you're the one that calls them, you're the one that they know the name of, it's like,
no shit.
No, that's actually true. Somebody came upon that cow, which was just made out of a, bunch of stuff, and they thought it was real.
Chris, we got to find that Weekly World News issue, because that definitely made it in there.
Yeah, I would love to listen to that radio or something.
Man,
episode.
I wonder if that's documented anywhere. That's amazing. Of course, they probably never really figured out that it was from Critters, so it would just be a dead end story on their end. But it's kind of amazing. I love it.
Yeah, yeah. So it was an interesting, frenetic film. It was something that. I was so busy on the other two things that I had to switch over to, and everything I had to do on From Beyond had to ship over to Italy, because we shot it on location in Italy. Somehow I'm hearing an echo of my voice here. So.
Oh, well, we're not hearing anything.
Okay. Anyhow, it was just one of those things that I just didn't really think too much about it, other than the alien cow found in the middle of the desert. Didn't think too much about it once it was done, and it was moderately successful, but I don't remember it being hugely successful either.
Do you remember your first time watching the movie? Did you see it in theaters? Did you see it on home video?
I was invited to a cast and crew screening, and I went to a cast and crew screening, and I was surprised by the fact that Steven somehow had managed to capture on film pretty much what he originally told us he wanted. Even though there was so much, like you said, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of added stuff, a lot of weird stuff. I have no idea why it was added, but it was, and they kept saying they needed it, and we kept giving it to them. So I guess that's the way it is. But the final cut was very, very similar to his script, and he also didn't get a whole heck of a lot of work after that. I don't know if you know that.
I guess not.
Yeah, I was. I short time after that, I set up my own stages, and I had my own second unit insert stages in North Hollywood. And so I had my sound stages. I had a little what you would call a photography stage or insert stage. I had a prop department, an art department, and I had a makeup effects department, production offices, and all of that in one location. And one day, Stephen dropped by and asked me if I needed any help. And I was like, okay. No. Now, he had made another film. He had another film. He had a film called Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Yep.
Oh, yes.
And they had decided not to finish it. It was sitting on a shelf because the special effects were going to cost too much. And it was a bizarre film. So the company that he'd worked for on that, it had just shelved it. And Stephen wanted to come in and paint my green screen for me, because he was painting houses.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
And luckily for him, not luckily for me, but luckily for him, the Writers Guild strike came up, and nothing happened. I mean, for like 6 months, the town was, you could hear crickets. Nothing happened. And a lot of people were very, very badly hurt, including myself, during that strike. But they did say, well, what have we got that, that we could release? And they said, well, we got this thing. And, this Keanu Reeves guy had done this, I think it was Caveman or something. He had done this other movie, and he's kind of hot right now. And we do have a film with him in it. Maybe we should finish it. So they finished it, brought it out. It was a huge hit.
Wow. That is crazy.
And then he went on to do all kinds of films, including the Three Musketeers, and he did quite a few films for Disney.
Wow. Did you ever see the sequels?
No, I did not.
No.
I kind of have a thing, like, if they, well, I can say the same thing about Bride of Reanimator. I never saw it either, because it was not made by the same director, and because it really wasn't the sequel to Reanimator. From Beyond was.
Yeah, Stuart Gordon did that, and
same group of people. Same group of people, and we went to Italy, and we had a little more money. Reanimator and From Beyond are two of my best experiences in the film industry. When I left the Land of a Thousand Faces at Universal in the 70s and went over as head of special projects and research and development at Don Post Studios, they had just the previous year, they had signed the very first license for Star Wars, which was honest to God worded that the license was for any full-size representation of the characters in the United States. And it was for 7 years. So anytime that they were going to do any promotional work, it all had to be done through me. So anytime Darth Vader went on a talk show, or the guys put their hands and feet in cement and all of that, Lucas had to get my permission. And any piece of second unit insert footage that was done, any of the creature work, any of that sort of stuff that came into the United States had to go through our shop. And so we took care of the original Darth Vader costumes, and we took care of, I became pretty good friends with Kit West. And then we also did Dune when I was there, and Kit was also special effects there. And we put together the very first Boba Fett's that were ever shot were actually assembled and painted at Don Post Studios.
That's amazing. So, I mean, Critters is really kind of low on your accomplishments list, honestly.
Well, it's nothing's low, Critters is I had not done a whole lot in the way of horror films. We redid the ending of one film for Tobe Hooper when I was at Don Post, and then Deadly Blessing. And then, on Bill Malone, and we created this cool character and shot it, backlit, and it was a neat ending. But that was all we did on the film. And then I did Reanimator. but I had done a lot of human recreative stuff. I had built the first dissectable arm for the American College of Physicians. I had done things like that. I was an ex-EMT, and so when Stuart for Reanimator had me actually go and witness, I had to go and see live autopsies and do that sort of stuff for the autopsy scenes.
Wow.
Critters follows right in after that. So all of the the effects, the wounds, all of the critters, scrapes, scratches, all of the stuff on D and all the stuff on Billy Greenbush, who was an angel of a man. I really became good friends with Billy. Um, and Scotty running around on his bicycle all the time saying, "Scotty, get in here," you know. Um, and all of that sort of stuff was just yeah, it lent itself very well to what I was already kind of doing at the time.
Now, were you the one that confirmed for me that Billy Greenbush has passed away, or because that's something that we in the fan base haven't really been able to figure out for a while. He's definitely kind of fell out.
I was working with Billy a couple of years after this. And we were actually working with Roy Rogers and Lash LaRue and a bunch of old cowboy stars. And and they wanted to make this movie called Riding Off into the Sunset. And I was trying to help them package it as a producer, because we do a lot of, when you start doing second unit stuff, and it's basically you're making mini movies. So we own a lot of our own stories and stuff as well. So the bottom line is we were trying to put that together, and unfortunately one of the actors got very, very sick and never got better. So that was kind of the last time I saw Billy. Is after that whole thing, I talked to him a couple times on the phone, but I do not know. I would assume, because he was several years, several years my senior, he would have to be quite old at this point.
Yeah, we've never gotten like a date or anything like that.
Yeah, I everybody I've talked to, and I've been trying to get a hold of him or somebody that knows, and nobody can get any confirmation of whether or not he's still alive, and they can't get a hold of anybody like family or friends or anybody that knows. It's strange. He kind of just dropped off after he did Jason Goes to Hell back in the mid '90s, and he's never done any interviews or anything after that.
We did, this was in the '80s. We tried to do the thing with Gene Autry and Roy Rogers and Lash LaRue and just a whole bunch of the old cowboy stars. And it was supposed to kind of be that. It was supposed to be, here's all the old guys, John Goff and all these, I think Jack Palance was going to do a walk on it, and just all these old cowboy stars. And unfortunately, it just didn't happen. Gene got sick and never got unsick. Gene Autry.
Yeah, that would have been really cool to see, especially with Billy Greenbush and everything in it.
Well, I grew up in Phoenix, and I studied stunt work and weapons work with Tiny Wells, and I worked out at Apache Land, one of the original movie ranches, and I helped to build Rawhide near Scottsdale, and which is really funny. They're trying to build that as a real ghost town now. I'm going, hell no. Bunch of my high school and college set building guys built that.
Oh wow.
It's like, no, it wasn't real. There were a couple of the old buildings from Apache Land in it, but that was about it. Well, it's if you find out about Billy, I would like to know. Unfortunately, he was just
we'll definitely contact you. Yeah.
A real sweet guy, a gentleman all the way through, and I would have to say that that working with Dee Wallace Stone was also great. I met her at one of the Monsterpaloozas recently, and she was just as warm as ever and very nice. That was great, and the cast has gone on to do wonderful things, including the Orville.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, like Scott Grimes,
Yeah.
a few years back when that American Dad cartoon came out, and
Right.
Scott Grimes comes up in the credit, and I'm just like, from Critters? I couldn't fucking believe it because he really did fall off for a very long time. So
Yeah.
to make that comeback, or at least it seemed, and now doing the Orville and everything, yeah,
Right.
he really became something from it. In fact, in one of the American Dad episodes, they even make like a Critters joke, like Scott Grimes like makes a reference to Critters and like bashes the franchise a little bit.
I've heard a couple of Critters jokes in movies.
Yeah,
When you've done 118 films, you start you start hearing some of the little insider stuff when they're in American Beauty, when they're up on the he's up with the boyfriend who's getting high up on the roof, and he's up there talking to him. They're talking about Reanimator.
Really?
Yeah. that whole scene. Now that I've told you that, you got to look at it again because that whole scene's about Reanimator.
That's hilarious. Oh wow. Let's see here. I knew I had some more questions for you here. I'm just kind of sitting in my car because you're in your car too, right, Chris?
Yeah, I'm in my car too.
Yeah, it's like how we get the best reception because we're out in the middle of nowhere, both of us. So, I don't know, Chris. You got any questions off the top of your head here? I'm digging.
Yeah, well, since you were involved with all the special effects and everything, did you get to keep any of the effects that were used, like any of those guns or anything?
People ask me this sort of stuff all the time. And I'll just have to tell you that the answer is pretty much no, because if I had kept all the stuff that I'd built, I would have to have a lot bigger. I would have to have a warehouse somewhere that I would have been paying a ridiculous amount of money for all these years.
At least 118 items, one from every movie, right? So
yeah, I became really good friends with Debbie Reynolds at one point, and she did that. She had 2 warehouses that she was paying air conditioning for, and all of this stuff for all of these things that she had collected for like 50 years.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, she had this fabulous, which was sold in 3 different auctions to be able to get rid of all of it not too long ago. But you just don't do that. I mean,
there's not one item from any movie that you've ever kept. There's not one.
Well, I'll tell you, from the original Reanimator, I kept the original molds for the neck stump, for the anatomical head, and for those pieces. And the reason was they were going to do, believe it or not, they were going to do a cable television show. And
really?
that was the talk. And so they asked me to keep them, and I kept them. And then they were talking about sequels, so I kept them. And I loaned a couple of the molds out. I got all but one of them back, which was the David Gale head. I got everything else but that back, and I still have those. And that was good because I did Reanimator the musical. Tony and I did Reanimator the musical in 2010, 2011. And if we hadn't had that, there was no way we could have started from scratch.
Wow, so it did come in handy all those years.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea where any of the props you made for Critters might be nowadays, or do you just assume that they were all destroyed? I mean, we know where kind of the Critters are, but the stuff
I don't know if Tony Dublin kept any of the weapons, because he was in charge of the weapons. So the weapons came and went to set in his truck.
It would be nice to know those still exist. That would be great.
Yeah. I don't know.
Especially the rubber one. I don't know. No.
Yeah. The how it popped up, the gun tilted, it sat on his waist. It was like a hip cannon, and it would mounted on his waist, and then rose up and then extended out. The the device to rise it up was a Craftsman ratchet.
Okay. Now, how did that necessarily work?
Well, a ratchet, you just, click, click, click.
So it's just just as simple as that.
It was a ratchet. If you hit it too
Oh.
hard, it would go up and look like a big erection sticking off the front of you. So they had to practice with it to get it so it came up to be pretty much perpendicular.
And why were the guns so phallic?
Well, because it was hip mounted and it extended. I mean,
so this was all intentional?
No, it wasn't intentional. It was they wanted something that literally
the porn company forced this in.
Yes, right. That was it. Yeah, they used the prop for one of their last. They just put a silicone cover on it. Anyhow, no, I have totally joking. No,
of course.
They wanted this thing. They wanted this thing to be dynamic looking enough that when they shot something, it blew up. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
When that cannon came up, you knew something was going to disappear, and that was that was the whole idea. Was there's no subtlety to that weapon whatsoever.
I do love. Do you have a favorite scene in the movie? Not necessarily one you worked on, just as a viewer of the movie.
Well, I always like characters that are intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
I watch a lot of horror films, and I'm like, okay, that person should die. That person's an idiot.
Yeah. Well, that's fun too, though.
Yeah, turn and run like hell. I mean, it's. I think that's one of the reasons the original Halloween was so popular, was the Jamie Lee Curtis character was trying to do anything but be where she was with that thing that guy coming after her.
Yeah, so, she was making the right moves. You're right.
Yeah. And I got the kick out of this, a lot of the stuff that Scotty and then Billy Green Bush did, where they were just kind of like, okay, all right, we gotta attack these things. We gotta turn this around. And the little flamethrower gag, that was great. The spray, the hairspray and the match and that sort of stuff. That's pretty cool. I liked that type of element of it. It was kind of a typical monster movie up to the point where they said, hell no, this is my house and I'm going to take it back. And they started fighting back against the Kreitz and where the dichotomy of the film shifted at that point is where I kind of liked it the best.
You make a good point, especially being a big monster movie buff myself. Yeah, that is kind of what makes Critters, especially for the time, stand out, is that everyone just wasn't a dumbass in it.
Yeah, I wrote a syndicated movie review column for 6 newspapers for a while, and I got in a big long argument once over Alien versus Aliens, and I had actually written a better review of Aliens than I did on Alien, and I actually did a little second unit work on Alien. All right, so Aliens was, to me, more entertaining, and you had these guys that the team guys and gals that went in there, and they went in there fighting, and I liked that. It was to me, there was more story there than just walking around hoping this thing's not going to leap down on you and kill you.
Sure. I think people praise the original because it's so much more atmospheric, I guess. You could compare it in a way to the original Halloween in that sense. But yeah, the sequel, especially, I'm only 31. The sequel is way more entertaining to watch as a kid. I watched that over and over again.
That is exactly what that was the argument I had with this dude. It was through the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror. He cornered me after one of the meetings, and he's like, I read your review, and he's just like, and I said, something? I said, was it more entertaining? And he goes, well, yeah, but I said, no, stop right there. I said, I make my living in the entertainment industry. And when you say that the one is more entertaining and it's a more, it's got better characters, and it builds action, and it builds tension, and it does a really good job of all those. Whereas the first one was just you were waiting for the next shadow that this thing is going to jump out of.
You're not wrong.
And so and anyhow, I think that anytime that you've got a film that makes that shift, where humanity, being humanity, rises up above it and kicks its ass, I love that.
Now, being that you worked on Critters, a monster movie, do you have a favorite monster movie of all time? Something you grew up with? I'm sure getting into movies and getting to work on a monster movie and being into that, it's got to be some sort of an accomplishing feeling to be like, I'm working with monsters here. I'm making monsters, And so what was your favorite monster?
My mom was a psychologist.
Okay.
So I was not allowed to watch a lot of monster movies, but I will have to tell you that I was allowed to watch the parodies.
Okay.
And, the Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
Oh, God, I love them.
And there was a couple of films where Red Skelton played a character of this detective named the Red Wolf or something, a Red Fox or something like that. Anyhow, on the radio, and he went out and lived that a little bit too, and he gets invited to an island off the coast of Florida, and they've got a lot of the Haitian voodoo and stuff in it, and there's zombies, and there's that character, that sort of thing, and that scared the bejesus out of me. So those were the films that I liked. I did manage to see Creature from the Black Lagoon. I always thought that was a really cool creature.
Yeah, it's one of the best.
I tried to resurrect it at Universal too, but we found the original molds.
Really?
Yeah. At one point, we found the original molds. In fact, if you go on to the Bob Burns Creature Halloween Spectacular at his house, his private Halloween show that he did for years, and if you look up his creature show, Bob Burns Creature Show, the head shoulders piece and the hands were from the original molds. I had one of the 4 castings out of the original mold before the molds we had a huge storm, and the molds the roof collapsed and the molds got destroyed.
Unbelievable. But you do have castings.
I had a casting. I sold it. You got to understand, guys, when you ask me if this stuff's still around, rubber is a protein. It's from a tree. And when you put it in a mold, the ammonia and stuff like that are in there that help it to react and help to slush cast it, all of that goes away, and it basically ends up as just rubber. And if it gets exposed, and people didn't know this back then, but if it gets exposed to ultraviolet light, anybody smoking anywhere nearby just destroys rubber. It disintegrates. And so when you're talking about people asking me about, Critters and Halloween 3 Season of the Witch and stuff like that, I go, guys, those were, 35, 36 years ago. That rubber's gone. I've got a piece of, one of the anatomical head props from Reanimator that we made shortly after the film, and we were trying to get a license to sell them, and then they said no. And so I threw them in a bag, and I gave a couple of them to Stuart, and I just handed a couple of them out after that. But I just found one of them in a box upstairs, and I was somebody's saying, well, it's got some cracks on it. I said the whole thing is if there weren't foam inside of it, because foam will stay, foam is plastic, it'll stay, but the rubber part of it is dry as heck. You put your finger right through it. But because the foam is holding it all together, it's still pretty presentable if you want it, But I mean, old rubber is pretty much rots after about 20 years.
Yeah, I followed a guy who preserves Don Postmass from the 60s, and like one or two might exist still of some of those masks. And it's just always just an incredible story of how one managed to stay decades in the perfect conditions to actually survive,
Pete Roberts actually bought, he's one of the biggest Stonk Post collectors. Pete Roberts actually bought that original creature from me.
Oh, really? Really?
It was the cover art for the Christie's auction one year.
Oh, wow. Oh, that is incredible. Wow. Well, Chris, you got any other questions?
No, he answered everything that I threw at him, and
yeah,
John,
no,
John, it's been amazing talking with you. I love hearing these stories. Is there any more stories that you have working on the set?
Well, I tell you one thing that I would like to do, guys, is because the IMDb credits are a little weird in the fact that they don't really tell who did what. Can I kind of clear that up a little bit?
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about the makeup effects. I was the lead of makeup effects. Then, of course, they had a regular makeup artist and hairstylist. That was for the beauty stuff. And my primary assistant was John Criswell. And John Criswell went on to head up the mechanical. He was lead mechanical artist for the Henston Creature Shop for 18 years. Tom Flouts did some work on the show. Greg Johnson did some work on the show. Julie Major was an on-set artist for me and one of my ex-students. I already mentioned before that in the lab we had John Goodwin, Jerry Quist did some stuff, and we had some construction, elements that were done by Frederic Gallon Schaefer and Greg Johnson as well. And then after I left the show, they still had 3 days of inserts to do, and Chris Biggs and Bill Forshey came in and did those.
So we give mad props to everybody that was involved with this. It's such an amazing movie, and I've loved it ever since I've been was able to even watch, old enough to even watch TV and understand what was going on. And both me and Sean, I think we're both the same age, right? Sean, 31.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, for you as well, this movie is one of the only movies that remains as a rewatchable movie every single day in our lives, pretty much. Like we talk about it all day, every day, and we just love everything about it. And we love that there's so many people that are involved with this that have these stories to share. And John, we love the stories that you have shared with us today. We appreciate you coming on here and sharing those with us.
It really does mean a lot.
You're very welcome. And I forgot to mention Tony Dublin, of course, because he did the props part of it for the special effects props and the weapons and the growing critters, and did a lot of work. He still works on a regular basis with the Kyotos. All right. Well, you guys are welcome, and I'm glad you enjoy the work. And I would love to say we had a lot of fun making the film. It wasn't one of the film that I remember as a lot of fun. I just remember it as mass chaos that worked out. It was just so many changes and this and that, and then in the end, it was like, well, that's pretty much what we started out to do. I don't know what all the fuss was about.
It's really cool, man. Like Chris was saying, it's it captivated our imaginations when we're kids, and to be sitting here at 31 and actually interviewing you, it's really, it feels like a lot of purpose. So thank you so much for giving us the time, man.
Well, you're welcome. And my son was out here today, and he's in the business, and he is technical, digital technical director, and my son turns 40 in July. So, you guys are making me feel a little old, but that's okay.
Well, thanks for making me feel young. Just fucking. Can we get you to say "kill more Krites" for us before we sign off here?
Sure, kill more Krites.
All right, thank you, buddy. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, John.
Okay, we'll talk to you later, buddy.
Yeah, bye-bye.